Hello, my name is Austin Moore, and you're listening to the We Want Tomorrow podcast. I created the concept for the show because my generation, and a lot of people don't realize this, is the first in history to really face the reality that we might be the last of whatever that you want to call this part of civilization, this era, that we might be standing on the verge of the collapse. And not in too much of a conspiratorial way, I don't think that there's many cases that you can make against that argument. We are watching the last dregs of our society be able to function the way that they have been outlined, and how we've been told that everything should work. But with the threat of climate change being the greatest, the fact that spaceship Earth, our one and only home, is about to be unsustainable. And not only that, but we've been robbed of the very resources that we could have had to handle what has really been an unprecedented time in human history. Just in the past 40, 20 years, no one could have predicted that what's happening would have happened. To be living in the information age where literally the entire wealth of human knowledge is at our fingertips, and yet none of it matters because we live in a post-facts society where we can look around and point to so many things, the climate being the most important one, and be like, hey, was there any exit strategy? Was there any long-term plan that showed any level of effectiveness? And how much of the actual science was swept under the rug for what? For profit? Why was there no plan put in place to handle what's happened? And it's because you couldn't have planned for it. We couldn't have planned for things like what information would be. We couldn't have planned for what news would become. We couldn't plan for just the voracious appetite and how devastating the effects of these traditional values left their scars on everything. And what we're left with is a zero plan exit and zero accountability taken for it. My generation, I'm 22. Some people lump me in with a millennial. Some people lump me in with Gen Y. The consensus among our opponents is that we are just needy and ill-equipped and are always looking for handouts and just the path of least resistance. And I'm like, can you really blame us? Because that's your perception of us just wanting a fair shake, when you can look at other times in this country and say, at least it was fair. Where now, whatever the statistics may tell you, people that I know and whole communities are showing that it doesn't matter if you work 40 hours a week. It doesn't matter if you're a 2-income household, that you are being, as a poor person and slowly as a middle-class person, you are being swept under the rug by these kleptocrats and these oligarchs that view you as basically like a pestilence. And that's why I feel like there's such little accountability, is that they're hoping that we'll just go away like some problem that can be easily swept away, when they don't realize these are people's lives. Or even worse, they do realize it, but they just don't care. You hear a lot of like, oh, why didn't you just work harder? Why didn't you find this avenue or whatnot? And it's like, with what time? With what the typical American is responsible for, whether that be child rearing, having a career, supporting not just family, but all sorts of other people that become dependent on people for whatever reason, be it disability or just not being able to fit such the rigid mold that we've put for having the ability to make money in this country. And the simple fact that anyone that's wagering their time in exchange for money is losing, and you're not going to become rich that way. That you look at sections of the population in which all this great wealth that we have actually is accumulating, and it's the sleaziest ways to make money. It is literally every industry that's in bed with suppressing some other person or type of people or demographic in order to benefit from it. And it's hard, borderline like impossible, not to call bullshit on the whole idea of the American dream still being true. I have to resign myself as a 22-year-old that works 40 hours a week, doing a job that I feel should have respect, blue collar. I work construction, and yet I'm living paycheck to paycheck, which I know so many of you listening are in that same position and wondering, like, how the hell did this happen? It used to be the case that you could just work a part-time job and put yourself through school. Now, what prayer do you have to educate yourself to any level of betterment, to reach these levels of achievement that they expect you to have to be able to deserve anything in their eyes? What chance do you have when you have to sustain yourself full-time, go to school, be in charge of that part of your education, and live a normal, well-rounded life of relationships that matter and actually have substance to them? How in the world does a person have that time to do that in this society without major levels of privilege? And here's where people attack that position by saying, oh, you just want to give handouts, you just want socialism, which I don't know why that is such a dirty word. Literally everything in the New Deal that saved this country because of FDR was called socialism by those conservative thinkers like at that time. And now it's just the new norm. It's just taking care of people, which I don't want to get into it on this episode, but is really inefficient for all the wrong reasons and should be reformed on a level of actually trusting people instead of holding people hostage to their situations. But I digress to the point of asking is, what's wrong with investing in people? That's where I mostly see the issues stemming from in this problem that we have of parts of this country ending up like the third world. And how should that be right in one of the most prosperous countries by design that people live like this? Is this not like a huge corporation that we're all a part of, and we are not getting our fair share put back into people? We're having to pay the bill and suffer the consequence, while those that have don't see the same consequences that the poor do. And we see that with the upper 1% wanting to just remove themselves from society and put themselves behind gates and huge swaths of land in the middle of nowhere to where that they can get away from the consequences that they are a part of. The fact that they had the opportunity to make that money at all is built on the backs of their fellow countrymen, and they don't seem to care at all. They completely fail to see that the way around that is to actually have less losers, to have less people just absolutely chewed up and spit out by just the pace of things. What would be the issue with taking a second to just stop and say, okay, let's look around and realize how the very reason why you want to remove yourself from society, all these ills that you think come with poor people, are a result of them just not having purpose, of them not having a way of life that is gratifying for them. And to say that it's impossible to gratify everyone, well, you're just not being realistic at the resources that we have. That if we just had that brief moment to pause and actually care about everyone as a collective, like, population, that if given that chance could change the way that people live forever, that we could become a model. The fact that people say that a utopian society is impossible are the ones that believe that we can't overcome those base instincts of greed and me first and the power dynamics of dog eat dog and the top 8 rules. Why not make it so that your power is actually benevolent and that people admire you for the role that you play in society instead of it just being like, oh, we're doing fantastic. There's more billionaires than ever. How is that kind of wealth hoarding good for anyone? What is really the purpose behind creating these people? When the system that creates that giant amount of wealth and power is built upon suppression and oppression. I realize that it's not going to be a simple cut and dry answer to this, but we have to at least open the narrative to be like, what is the alternative? What do we do? Because if this terrible trend continues, that just the haves just have more and the have-nots just do with less and less and less, is you're going to end up with a population that's going to get blindsided by what's coming to us, and that's undeniable. And that once again brings us to the most pressing issue, which all these other issues tie back in to how we're going to be equipped to handle this, but that is climate change. Once you look at the pushback that you get whenever you try to talk about this issue, and you wonder, is it just denial? Is it just guilt? Is it like full-on panic that creates these people that want to just disbelieve science itself when it says, hey, we're not going to have anything that makes any of this possible really soon if we don't fundamentally change the way that we do? And I truly believe it's more ignorance than people's actually unwillingness to care, because if we actually manage to get to a unified front on this issue, we could see that everything else can wait to be sorted out until this is solved. But at the same time, no, because it all ties into each other. Because how does a regular person working 40 hours a week, trying to raise a family, trying to have any semblance of a normal life, have any time to really be informed? And when the sources that are supposed to be doing that for us are often engaging in misinformation, and that's all to do with defending the profits of these giant energy corporations. Like, how did that become what common people defend? Is the people making money off the death of this planet. And that's truly what it is, when we've been saying for the better part of a decade that, hey, we need to roll back fossil fuels. Hey, we're reaching almost the point of no return. And now the new study is showing that at this point we have 18 months to really figure something out, or else we reach an irreversible point of no return. I want to take a second to recommend the amazing book, The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells. I can't recommend giving this a read enough if you want to see where things are headed. He breaks it down degree by degree of warming because of greenhouse emissions, of what is really going to happen to us as a planet, and what you're going to see, and that we're not ready to shoulder the burden of this crisis because we're already in a crisis of meaning, of existentialism, of what it actually means to stand for anything in this country, and picking sides or whatnot, that we are not ready for large swaths of this earth to become uninhabitable, and those people are not just going to go away. They're going to become refugees, and these people have as much of a right to live as anyone else. And we're going to learn really fast and unpleasantly what people backed into that kind of corner are capable of, and it's not going to be good. And most likely, unfortunately, it's going to erupt in violence when things are so scarce, because you can't blame people's want to continue, and you can't blame people's drive to survive. And that's one thing that we can pride ourselves on as humans, is how incredibly resilient we are. But that doesn't mean that we should just keep the status quo going until we are looking around and being like, oh no, what are we really in the thick of it? We have the ability to have foresight, so why aren't we? And something that he outlines in the book really well, and something that's hard to wrap your head around, is that what it's going to take to reach any point of reversal and bring back a healthy ecosystem that we can all sustain for the next couple generations to come. It's going to require a mobilization of people on the scale of World War II, except what we're going to be fighting is our environment itself as it becomes more and more hostile. And you look at a realization of that magnitude and you realize there's no way that all these powerful people are in the dark about this. There's no way that they can be so ignorant to think that everything is just going to be sustainable the way that it is. So the question is, do they know? Do they care? Are they just trying to grab as much as they can and watch the clock run out because they've had their shot and they got their slice of pie? So what does it matter for the rest of us? That's a really morbid thought to have, but a legitimate question to ask, because if you're so intelligent and so capable that it makes you a leader in these industries and has brought you this insane amount of power and wealth, there's no way that you can wield that and not know on a base level what's actually going on. If so, and it's really just a matter of like crippling ignorance and being so far removed from actual people's like experience, then that is also something that's entirely solvable. And some people are content with just sitting back and being like, well, you just can't change things like that. And no, I believe that you can. And the only way to do it, because there is going to be no violent revolution, there is not going to be any kind of change on that scale that fast through means of taking it back, because the unfortunate truth is that the people that are on the right side of history on that side will lose, because they don't have the same access to the resources that it takes to wage war, to actually make it so people are accountable for the crimes that they've committed. And so you ask, what is the possibility of us changing that? And it happens with social movements. It's going to require, and I truly believe that this crisis will make it so this is the first time that we see it, but it's going to be a social movement on a scale 10 times anything that we've seen before, 10 times the human rights revolution in this country, 10 times. I'm having a hard time even thinking about something to compare it to, but people have the ability to change when it matters. And we just need to start asking these questions sooner so that we're not as crunched for time to make these changes a reality. And the more we do, the better off we're going to be for it. If it feels like I'm just skimming through these topics, I understand. And I do want to break down each one of these things that I'm tackling in future episodes and really do a deep dive on it. But in this first episode, I just want to outline like exactly what the purpose and the like kind of thesis of this show is going to be. And I'm truly going to want your feedback on this. And that's why I've set up wewanttomorrow.com. And there I'm going to have the ability in the future for us to correspond more and make this show more of a community effort when it comes to discussing things. I want us to be able to share sources on various issues when they come up and they become discussed. And if I'm uninformed and there's something that I'm messing up because I just don't have the right data for it, but you can give me a reputable source, I would love to see that and see open discussion on the forum that I'm going to have on that website. So again, that's wewanttomorrow.com. There's going to be an email list that we'll be able to do stuff with. There's going to be upcoming these episodes are going to come out, and hopefully I want to turn this from a bi-weekly thing into a weekly thing. I'm going to try to have the next episode up by next Monday, and we'll try to keep that pace. And I really, really can't stress enough how much I want to hear feedback, and I want open discussion without just screaming at each other because of these beliefs to occur on that site. And I truly believe that we are capable of making something really beautiful here. Because this is one of the last actual rights that we have that hasn't been disguised as something else, is the fact that we can discuss these things. And it's reflecting on my frustration about these topics and my frustration just period with how the things are. I realize that this is one of the few avenues that we have to actually affect change. And again, the kind of thesis of the show is just, are we asking the right questions? Because engaging in anything politically has become such an issue in this country that it doesn't matter what position you have, someone also can find a source that disproves you or whatnot. And that brings me to my next point, is that we really have no idea what's going on. And that is another huge factor as to why we're in the situation that we are in, is that people are being fed misinformation. And there's so many just recent examples that we can point to. And I know I'm going to catch hell on this from the anti-conspiracy people, but it's reaching a point to where I truly think the ruling class is saying to themselves, we can pretty much do whatever now with total and complete safety in knowing that nothing is going to happen to us because of it. Anything recently from the Epstein situation, which I want to do a deep dive on, anything from these mass shootings that are taking place that have markings of false flag attacks, and I don't want to downplay any bit of tragedy like to it. It is undoubtedly a tragic thing, but why are we not allowed to ask questions as to why these things happen, and see that even though it has to deal with people's lives being taken away violently, there are holes that don't add up, and there are things that we shouldn't be under fire for questioning when we see them. And again, that's going to be a topic of another episode, but I digress. Into asking the more important question that I started on, what do we do as citizens, and what can we do knowing that we are being intentionally fed misinformation? And what do we tell people that don't believe that the major news sources are blatantly engaging in this misinformation? And it only takes a few historical lessons to show people that this has been going on for ages. We can look back at things like the conflict in Iraq, and now anyone that's not just had the wool completely pulled over their eyes can see that there were no weapons of mass destruction, and that it was an entire conflict based on just securing these assets for these very wealthy and very powerful institutions. And how is it in any way patriotic, and how can you defend that action when people that truly believe in their purpose in defending this country are being fed that down their throats, when they're really just pawns in this scheme being thrown away to make money? And the second you decide to talk about this at all, you catch so much just hate and so much just volatility from people in the military and people that have family in the military, and they're like, you don't support the troops, you don't appreciate their sacrifice, when I can say I think that people that are against that are more involved in the actual humanity of it and more for the troops than people that are willing to prop up these regime change wars and these war for resources that we find ourselves wrapped up in. Is that these people shouldn't have to make that sacrifice. They should only have to make that sacrifice, and they should absolutely be celebrated and held to entire standard of respect that it should be for the defense of this country. And it's been so misused and it's been so mistreated that the lines are so blurred that you can't tell what the hell these people are dying for. But again, it's another very classic American ideal that we can evolve past, is that we always need to be kicking someone's ass, and that we need to be the world's watchdogs, when really you look at these entanglements that we've found ourselves in, particularly in the Middle East, And these dangerous enemies, so that they say, are created because of our intervention and just because it seems like we can't leave well enough alone. And just because of how massive like our military might is, we find ourselves spread so thin that we get wrapped up in these proxy wars. That's Al Qaeda, and the entirety instability of that region came from the fact that we just couldn't openly fight Russia. It's like, and now for the entirety of my adult life, as much as I can remember, even in my youth, that we've been in Afghanistan to accomplish what? Because to rebuild a democracy and prop them up there, they don't want it. And if you get down to the brass tacks of it, it all just has to do with the fact that the only thing we make in this country anymore, and the billions and billions of dollars that's made in this industry, is all because of the military-industrial complex, and that we are a war economy. We rose out of World War II as a superpower because we made the biggest guns and made the most of them. And you can see just mountains of wealth for these like private military contractors that they get involved in starting these conflicts blatantly, because that's what their business depends on, is the fact that people will continue to fight. And if you remove that, you see a lot less conflict. And the fact, if we're not over carpet bombing Syria and destabilizing Libya by taking out Gaddafi and creating literally a failed state to the point to where you can see slave auctions in 2019 on YouTube because of how destructive that action was, that we see that maybe our intervention is so misplaced that it's better not to have it at all. And these people that claim that they want to put America first, let's do that. Let's be true to our allies and uphold what we can and is unavoidable to uphold. But what is the real issue with scaling back? What is the real threat that's going to destabilize the biggest military might the world has ever seen? Only China holds the second spot to that, and it's a fraction of what we have. When is enough just enough? And when do you look at it and be like, I think we'll be okay, let's focus on something else? When you look at just how much of the money that is taken from the American people and dumped into this, it's dumped into the budget to make these wars just more profitable for more people and to perpetuate them and to make sure that we have more stuff to blow up these people that look different than us. Like when it comes to discussing this topic, it's not that hard to just devolve into childish concepts like that when you break it down as to what it really is. And you look at everything else that could be used on, and it's like, yeah, public education isn't really that great, but it could be so much better if we weren't making teachers pay for school supplies at the beginning of the year, when we could just have one less Tomahawk missile, and that would pay for the supplies for an entire, like, school district, with how exorbitantly expensive and unnecessary all this stuff is, just to be like, nobody can ever mess with us. Let's scale it back and bring it back home, because that's the people that really need our attention, is this society that is turning to so much just to cope with it. Like, we see that in the opioid epidemic, is that people are just lost. And people, I truly believe that consciousness is rising to a level that the reason why in the most prosperous country on earth people are so unhappy even when they have the privilege that they have, is that humans are meant for more than just to work and die. And it's ridiculous that you even have to like put that out as a thought, but that's what's expected of you. Like, everyone that I know in my age group has accepted the fact that we're not going to get to retire. Whatever that promise was of the American dream, that at 60 you're going to get to rest on your laurels and all your hard work or whatnot, it's just simply not realistic anymore. And we look at how it's structured, and with Social Security and whatnot, that it's a known fact, and you can go and find these facts that they're true, that that's going to run out even with everything we're putting into it now in a very short amount of time. And the people that are paying into it now, such as me and my peers, aren't going to see a dime of that, and it's going to collapse, and it's just going to be another thing that there was no foresight, there was no exit plan, and we're going to have to find a solution. And the solution to that is to, again, invest in people. The reason we're being fed misinformation all the time is because they don't trust us with any form of like power for ourselves. And a self-governed people has to be a informed populace, and without the ability to be informed, we don't have a chance. Like, there literally is nothing that we can do. We're acting all on false premises, and this is where you get down to the crisis that we're having in this country of just polarizing left versus right. They are all liars. Everyone in this current system that has benefited from it and found success in it is the reason why it is so corrupt and never gets us anywhere. I talk about people want to label me as hardcore left, and that's where my beliefs are, but I truly don't have any faith in the left of this country at all, because we let it slip past us. Trump marked a time in which we could have swayed it and said, here are the facts, here's what we need to do, and things need to change. And the fact that we lost that battle tripping over ourselves and infighting and being tripped up over stuff as stupid as rhetoric and just getting upset at people because they use the wrong word at the wrong time, that has set us back to now, even though we have the facts, we can't do anything because they're not worth anything at all. People can just say, we don't care what the facts are. We're going to construct our own reality. And that's what Trump really represents. Trump represents what this country is devolving into. This like meth-addled, McDonald's eating, wanting to kick ass, xenophobic, like just selfish mentality. And it's because what they don't understand in the damage in letting someone like Trump actually take the reins is that nothing is serious anymore. You can literally do anything. A reality show star is the president of the United States and is making real hardcore decisions and influences that are going to affect people very negatively if they don't fit the exact mold of what these people, particularly the hardcore right, believe a citizen should be. And a citizen should just be someone that if they aren't part of the top, that they are meant to just work and die. And they can dress it up as much as they want, but that is the message that comes across to anyone that has access to the information and can look at it objectively. And the leftmost part of our own government is everything to blame as well. We could have had an actual candidate in Bernie Sanders that could have swayed the rhetoric and brought a seriousness and like a new way of thinking into it that could have influenced a lot of people. But what people don't realize people don't even know the story in which he was going to become the candidate, but the Democratic National Convention disliked him so much and thought he was too radical to the point where he wouldn't get elected, that even though he should have been the candidate, they rigged it in Hillary Clinton's favor. And you can do your own research on that and see that that is now just like a truth. It's not a controversy anymore. It's not a conspiracy. It happened. Look up who Seth Rich was. He was a staffer in the DNC and undoubtedly became the person that leaked the emails that revealed that they were conspiring against Bernie in the primaries. And that dude is dead. Shortly after that, a happenstance armed robbery happened at his house in which he was shot twice in the head. And we're supposed to believe that that's just happenstance? No. That's what you learn with when it comes to power at these levels, is that there's no such thing as coincidence. It is calculated. And we saw that with Epstein as well. Again, it all links into that kind of mentality and the fact that if you pose enough of a threat, you will be eliminated. Just look at another example, Gary Webb. He was the one way back in the 80s that leaked the fact that the CIA was smuggling cocaine actively to the United States to use in making crack cocaine to break down black and minority communities because they were seen as a threat, an outward and totally intentional, like, fuck you to these communities. because they are afraid of people finding themselves and finding purpose within their own communities, especially when they don't look like you. Gary Webb, again, look it up. He was shot twice in the head and the DA ruled it a suicide. Like, people are not above crushing suppression when it comes to stuff at this level, and it will happen. And knowing that that comes down from both sides, it's like, how are we supposed to look at anyone in the current system and not consider them deeply compromised? And what's the solution to that? I don't know. But what I know is that in any reform of government, these people have no place. In any reform of our American system, these people need to go. And the power that intelligence agencies that just go rogue, like the CIA and the FBI, and they've been proven to actively engage in our borders in the monitoring and suppression of our own populace, that shouldn't even be happening. The CIA shouldn't be able to operate internally. They should only be looking for what they say and what they mask their purpose as looking for the outright threats, identifying them and suppressing them in which they can. And there's a lot less of that, and there's more just actively working against people that just have a different opinion of how things should be. And they get suppressed actively because once whispers start, that's how movements start. And again, the only way that we're going to see this turned on our head is a social movement, the likes of which that we've never seen. How we implement that, I don't know, but it doesn't hurt to be optimistic and hope that that is a possibility that we can self-actualize and realize that that's what we need to do in order to take back this country that's been stolen from us. It is absolute kleptocracy. Just stealing and sectioning off and finding new ways to just siphon everything up. It's been that way ever since Reaganomics, where they said it was going to trickle down. Where was the trickle down? No. They did everything in their power to retain that wealth and that power, and that's what has got us to the situation that we're in right now. Another great example of people violently being suppressed was the person that worked it escapes me right now. I'd have to, when I do a deep dive, uncover that source again. But the person at the front of the Panama Papers, which was just a couple years ago, that revealed that so much of the wealth that is escaping this country is from these huge corporations, and that it ends up in these shell companies and these tax havens overseas. And when you see just how much money that actually is, there is so much resources to educate people. When they say, oh, well, who's going to pay for college for all or Medicaid for all? You should be paying for it. The people that have benefited the most should be paying for it. And if they actually found their fair share and didn't do all this financial wizardry and find these ways that are very effective in hiding their wealth, there would be plenty to go around. It's this false sense of scarcity that has been implemented in us, and it's been put on us as the common people, that it's just like, oh, you're just not working hard enough. Oh, you just haven't figured it out effectively. The means are there, when no, we are being heisted. Absolutely and 100% robbed. How is it that Jeff Bezos can become literally the richest person to ever exist and have enough money to just privately fund his quest to go to space, which part of me has to believe that that's because he knows that the situation that we're in right now is irreversible by his standards, and the way that he views the world to work is that there's no escaping it, so we better just find a new place to be. Instead, we do have an escape route by actually investing in people and once again laying the groundwork for that full-scale mobilization against the death of our planet. That is all possible if these people just pay their fair share. And I just don't see what is so, eludes people on this. The common people that don't see that they defend the very people that are taking advantage of them don't see that there's nothing wrong with a handout when it's this level of crisis. It's not even a handout, it's a bailout. Why do banks get bailouts but the population can't get a bailout to just take a breath? Why does every home have to be a 2-income household when I'm not making any generalizations against women or either parent could decide, but why would one parent not want to stay home during the early years of childbirth and actually take care and raise a child effectively, unlike we've been able to do for the last who knows how long, because the grind never stops and you have to perform no matter what you're dealing with, and that leads to people being neglected, and that really hurts people's souls. And I don't see how you can argue against how we're a deeply traumatized nation, because it is true that it takes a village to raise a child, yet we're not even getting a village, we're getting not even one parent actually doing like what they should do to make sure that this person is well-rounded and taken care of at the early stages of their life so that they're equipped for life. And again, people come around and say, well, what are we going to do about it now? We can't change it. And it's like, we absolutely can. And if we believe in any sense of the future, the sooner that we start that and realize that people are just not meant to slave away the way that they do, and no other country is forced to work like we are for so little gain. People should have the opportunity to take the time that they need to become educated, to become assets for this country. And that's what's slowly slipping away, is that people are becoming less and less, and it's just a customer service based economy. It's like, how many more call centers, how many more young people are we going to waste on stuff like that, when we could just take a step back and be like, do we really need this? We can fundamentally change society on a level that it's like, we can do without these things. Just because they exist doesn't mean that we can't go back to living a simpler life. And that's what it's going to take to survive, is that everyone's going to have to live a little bit simpler. And I truly believe, and it's just a personal belief, it's not based on anything, but I personally know that living simpler leads to being happier. And again, it's not like we have to be like in the dirt poor. Again, you look at the Panama Papers, you look at the way things can be restructured, you look at how much money we just throw away, these blank checks that we write to these wagers of war, and you see that it is there. Even if we all split it up evenly, it'd still be pretty good. We wouldn't have to do without. And if you looked at the potential that we all have, the potential for utopia is there, and utopia isn't everyone having everything. It is finding meaning and actually defining what it means to be an American, and that's what we lack right now. Really ask yourself what you believe being an American is, and back that with the reality that we're facing, and you'll see that we're just lost. We can find the way, and I truly believe it exists. Humans are incredible, and even though I'm highlighting a lot of negative things, it's only in order to show that we have more potential than that. And I only argue these things because I have belief in the human potential. And we are meant to evolve past this, and we will. And we can make it a beautiful evolution if we just take the time to ask, how can we? Stop being so short-sighted and selfish. And the greed that we see in the people around us, and the corruption and everything, is just a byproduct of people not finding their meaning. Crime is a reflection of the ails of society, and if you don't feel safe where you are, it's because the right resources weren't routed to make it so people had another option. People don't want to be criminals. People don't want to be bad. People inherently want to do good, but they can only do so much with what's given to them. And if we just give them more and don't just demand that they give more and more of their soul for it, you'll see that people can flourish. And that's the sentiment that I'm going to leave you with. And again, I would love to see any discourse for this episode, questions that you have for me, sources on anything that we've been talking about. I just want to open the narrative, and that can be done on I'll have a link to my email that can be sent to me. I want to maybe in next episodes get input from you as an audience about what I should talk about, and how things that you may know that I don't pertain to these issues. Please help me to illuminate my own understanding if I'm lacking any knowledge. And again, I don't want to see just pissing matches in there of right versus wrong. Again, the purpose of this show is just to open the narrative, and I'm just telling you my perspective and where I'm coming from, and offering the perspective of someone that knows that if we don't do something, it's going to be over. And not in a pessimistic way, but in a hopeful way, that it's like we can avoid that. We don't have to just steer into it. And thank you for listening, and I will see you guys next week with a new episode. Love and take care of each other. Bye.